Okay, welcome to my tutorial on how to rehab a romantic blush style shoe. I've had these for a while. They're in pretty good shape, so that makes this part pretty easy. I chose to rehab these because after getting rosé, I find that I really just don't reach for them anymore. So equipment, things that you're going to need. Obviously a shoe tree to hold the shoe flat. You're going to want to tape off the soles just to keep the dye from seeping on there. You want a paintbrush. This one, it's not a super high quality paintbrush because it's going to get dye. You can see that this one has previously been used for dye when I dyed a pair purple. The other things that you're going to want are rubbing alcohol. I use this to prep the shoe just to make sure you don't have any residue on there. You could also use acetone, but you're not actually taking any of the finish off, so alcohol is just fine to make sure there's no oils from your skin or other dirt there that might cause the dye to act weird. Also, Angela's dye, I'm using jet black. This pair is going to become black. I've seen several people who've done it and they look amazing, so we're going to give that a go. Please excuse the aircraft flying overhead. I do live on an air station. And then also cotton balls. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the cotton ball, get it good and damp with the alcohol, and just rub over the whole shoe. Okay, one thing I did forget to tape was the stripe, so I'm going to have to go back and get my tape. Cotton ball's drying off a little bit, so flip it over to the other side. Get the other shoe, and again, you're just trying to get any of the residue from, having worn them previously, having touched them. Just get a good clean starting work surface. That's the best way to get any sort of color to adhere uniformly. So now we'll just give that a few minutes to let that evaporate off so that your shoe is dry when you start. I'm going to pause this, tape up the stripes, and by the time I'm done with that, we should be ready to start the dye. Okay, we're back. So I have the stripes taped up. I use my fingernails to try and get it under the edge a little bit. It should prevent the stripe from getting any dye on it, but if it does, because these are for me, I'm not super concerned about that. It's afternoon, the sun's moving in, so I hope the glare is not too bad. So I have the box. The back of the box is an opening where you put the bottle so that you don't risk knocking it over. So take the dye out of the box, you get the dye, you get this wool applicator, which everybody who has worked with dye says do not use this. You can just throw it away, or you can find another craft use. Maybe you want to use it for sponging paint onto something. It would probably work okay for that. So close the box up. The directions do say shake well, so shake well. It's good practice for any sort of paint or dye product to shake it well. Get it in the box, and then just open it up. Now the way I do it, because I was a little paranoid that letting the dye sit on there too long might penetrate the scales, is the last time I did this, I did one shoe and then just went over it with cotton ball and alcohol, and that worked out just great. The dye immediately adheres to the shoe. So this paintbrush is just big enough to go in, and it really, I don't think it matters where on the shoe you start. Totally up to you. Last time I think I started on the heel and went all the way around. This time I just wasn't thinking about it and just went straight for the toe. So as you can see, it just goes on like paint. And, it's kind of a simple process, kind of relaxing, but kind of boring to watch. I just paint around the shoe. The dye can run So after I dip the brush in, and my brush is just about the same size as the opening, so it's really hard to get in. But you know, a full bottle of dye, it's right there at the top, so the paintbrush hits it just fine. But you know, after a few uses, I can see that it might have trouble getting in there. Just wipe off the brush so that you don't have a lot of excess. You know, by wiping it off, it probably only covers about a square inch or two at a time, but you know, I'd rather do it that way than, you know, have dye running down everywhere. I like to get the inside edges of the leather just so that it looks, you know, less like a rehabilitated shoe. And I do that for all the colors that I rehab, where I go inside the edge. And you'll notice one of my shoe trees I have taped up to prevent it from getting discolored by the paint. The other one I have not. Somehow my set got broken up, and I was just, you know, too lazy this time to tape up the one that wasn't taped. You know, again, just go around the edges. You know, when I go do the inside, I make sure I don't do it with a freshly dipped brush to prevent getting dye on the insole. But again, these are for me, so I'm a little less concerned about perfection than if I were doing them for somebody else. Just get along the edge of the stripe, especially get along the edge of the seam, you know, both sides. I am being mindful of my bottle since I am reaching over it. Move it out of the way a little bit. Normally I'd have the shoe pointed more towards me, but you know, trying to get to the camera a little bit. Get in all the edges, get in all the seams. Just keep working your way around the shoe, and when I'm done, I'll go back and make sure I got all the undersides next to the taped edge. I've got a CH-53 coming in for a landing. They do their approaches over our house. You know, as you can see, I got a little bit of dye on my hands. If you're, you know, that kind of thing bothers you, just wear some gloves. I find it's harder to do work like this in gloves because you lose a little bit of control. Things feel a little slippery. It's getting the bottom edge here. It's getting a little hard for me to see, so I think I'm only going to do the one shoe since the sun's coming in the afternoon. This would be easier to do in the morning for video, but I have a 4-year-old who loves to be involved in everything. And so from my perspective, it's easier to do crafts when she's not around. And I see I missed a big spot there because I got the glare coming off my glass table, and I didn't think to extend the paper. I'd always work over some sort of paper, that way you don't make a mess. Or if you do make a mess, you know, you're making it on paper that you can just, you know, throw away when you're done. So, you know, one last going over, and it's hard to tell on these if you missed a spot or if it's just areas where there's the foil where it's not fully adhering, because the dye won't fully adhere to the foil. So go around the bottom edge. And you know, the beautiful thing about dye is you can always go back over it. And something I did not bring out here was a finisher. I like to use the satin. Satin's pretty shiny. Again, you know, now that we've got the dye on there, you know, get your cotton ball with alcohol and just rub over. And you can see the scales are coming back to life. Go down the outside. Get the edges, and when I'm finished, I'll take the shoe tree out and do the front edge. Now this black dye It covers it up pretty well. Once your cotton ball kind of hits the point of saturation, just grab another one. And this would be a good step to use gloves for. But you know, I'm not overly fussed if I've got black fingers or any other color. Give it a quick look, try and get the sun out of my eyes. And as I found with the other pair that I did that was pretty beat up, so I didn't feel bad about using them as my test case, I had to, after I dyed them, repaint some scales because that one had lost a lot of scales, especially on the toe. And as I mentioned on the Teak Rehabbers group, I used a mix of about 3 parts silver, 1 part gold, or 4 parts silver, 1 part gold. You know, just a little bit of gold, because even though these scales are silver, I find that they cast goldish a lot. So putting a little bit of gold in the silver paint makes them stand out a little less. And so here we are. You know, one new dragon scale type black shoe, and you just follow the same step for the other shoe. I let it dry for several hours and throw some couple coats of finisher on it, call it good. So I hope this helps you out, and again, sorry that we've got helicopters trying to land in our yard. Thank you very much for your time.